Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We've got a fun show for you guys today. We've got Graham Coffey of Dawgs Central on the program today to talk all things, actually, Tennessee. So we don't even really hit on the Dogs on this one. So we do a deep dive into the Josh Heupel offense, how Josh has performed to this point as a coach here at Tennessee, an uptick in recruiting and what that means for the evolution of Tennessee's personnel and offensive scheme and whatnot. The debut of former five-star quarterback Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee this fall. We also do some hater or homer fun conversations about Florida and Texas specifically, and get Graham's perspective on both those programs coming into the 2024 college football season. So a lot of fun here on today's show with Graham doing a deep dive into the Vols and also some other SEC nuggets. So all that and more coming up in just 1 second. But don't forget, folks, before we dive into today's episode, that you can watch this show on YouTube, youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching this video or any other future videos on the platform. Make sure you're locked in on the video front if you are so inclined. You can also check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you get your podcasts. If you're listening on the audio route and you have not already done so, please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like what you hear today. And also leave this show a 5-star rating and a review. It helps other people find the show, and it helps this very show continue to grow. You can get in touch with me and the show at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. And also, go check out our website. All kinds of great information about the show that we do here each and every day on chasethomaspodcast.com. Past episodes, links, all that good stuff over there on the homepage, chasethomaspodcast.com. All right, Uncle Darren, let's go.
The Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm now joined by old friend Dawgs Central's own Graham Coffey, teammate Graham Coffey, for the first time.
Let's go, bro.
We are teammates, and one of the things that Graham's always said is, like, if I could be a teammate with someone directly tied to the Josh Heupel offense, then that is exactly what I want to hitch my wagon to. Graham, how are you?
I'm well. And yes, look, I'm a big fan of people giving me space instead of taking space. So I'm very much happy to be associated with the Josh Heupel tree here in the form of you. And yeah, man, things are going well. I'm excited. It kind of woke up this morning and it was like all of a sudden my Twitter feed was like filled with so and so said this at a press conference today, and it very much made it forefront of the mind that fall camp is kind of here, and a lot of these coaches are starting to talk to the press, and practices start this week, and then it feels like this is the start, really, at least in our business, because there's things that go on in fall camp and all that speculation, and then we'll blink and it'll be Christmas time. Yeah, so it's exciting. It's also a little overwhelming if I'm being 100% transparent, but it's overwhelming in a good way, just because I spend a lot of the year waiting for football to get back around, and it feels like football is finally getting back around.
Yeah, and I think this is the hardest part of the calendar, because this July to mid-August is brutal, because even here, you're not familiar, down in Athens, so when you're at Everything School HQ, you have year-round sports to really watch and see your teams win national titles, divisions, win a lot of games, throughout the year.
Smooth over the disappointment of fall. Yeah.
Well, not even smooth over. It's just to build off what fall is building. So fall is laying the groundwork for what we're seeing in the winter and spring sports. But and we'll get into why they might all be on the same page sooner rather than later. But it's when you look at fall camp and everything you're at, I am such a nerd. It doesn't matter how old I get, Graham. It means nothing, because they show you so little. But they're my buddies over at Rocky Top Insider. Rick Butler, he does the videos of all the drills, and he puts this royalty free music behind it on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube page. And I kid you not, when that hits tomorrow morning, when I load that up, that 7-minute just Rodney Gardner doing those old school drills with the defensive line, and he just pulls the stick up over and over again, and you have this crazy royalty free soundbite going. Like, I won't even need coffee anymore. I'll just be ready to run through a brick wall, Graham. Like, that's all I need. Like, that's all. That's all I need. I don't know if that you're the same way, but I could watch dumb college football practice reels with fun backgrounds just to get ready. Where I'm like, oh, we're close. That will hold me over until the first game.
I mean, I very much actually share some of that as well, and just like the I'm really looking forward to the first like text message from some source that's like, hey, this freshman wide receiver, it's.
Do y'all still take?
He's going to be the one,
Do y'all still take high school recruits at the receiver position? Or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nitro Tuggle is a ball player, man. I mean, he is. He's a good player.
It's a great name.
Top 20 receiver. Yeah, dude. If you're like a kid from Nitro, like a kid named Nitro Tuggle, like you're gonna ball.
I think there's a kid in North Carolina in the 26 class. I think you're familiar with. Smoke. What's his name? Is Smoke something? Smoke's always a great name, a football player name in the South. What is his name? It's Smoke something. But he's in North Carolina. He's in the 2026 class. But now there's some good names. Who's the best name right now on the 2024 team for Georgia? Mpimba is definitely going to be a great defensive line at Georgia. Like Samuel Mpimba is just one of those, like that's a great defensive line name for a Georgia player. He's going to be good.
Yeah. DeMello Jones is a pretty good one. Like
for
a 5-star corner. Yeah. That's pretty like solid, exciting name.
Malachi Starks is an obvious one. That's a good name.
You've got Joseph Jonah Ajanye, who was 5-star defensive lineman in this last cycle. There are a lot of there's not that like clear, there's no like Champ Bailey on this roster.
Champ Bailey's an all-timer.
Yeah, it is. But you gotta take what you can get this time of year. But
Greg Blue was always a hard hitter, right? Like Greg Blue was always going to be someone who hit hard, like that kind of name. I don't know. Greg Blue is going to be a heavy hitting safety.
And then he was followed by Bakari Rambo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Georgia had some good safety names there for a while. Especially
Tennessee's got to go in right now. Boo Carter, freshman 4-star out of Chattanooga. That's
we were talking about Boo Carter the other day. Yeah.
Boo's gonna be fun.
I like Boo Carter.
I'm excited about Boo Carter.
Yeah. I'm
well,
I'm not, but it sounds nice.
This naturally brings us, Graham. This is going to be right up your alley. I thought this would be a fun podcast idea to do because you are an unequivocal capital H hater in a lot of ways. Love you, Graham, but you're
not gonna lie.
But it's fun because you're just
hater, dude. I'm really not. People think I'm a hater, but go on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
But it's not even hater in like there's a difference between being a hot take artist and a hater. Like you're a thoughtful hater, which is why it's so frustrating for fans because it's like he's hating, but he's also spelling out, and you're not really sure how to push back against this level of hate. It's like I don't really know what to do with that.
I've thought really hard about like the Heupel thing, and I'll just go ahead and like I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I will just say that like I have thought on a deep philosophical level about the Heupel offense and like what it means for just the overall mentality of your football team, and whether it means anything or not, honestly, is still a little bit to be determined for me. But like, if it does mean anything, it means that like, hey, we go out and our whole game is not whole game, but a lot of our game is like trying to catch you with your pants down. It's like we're in essence kind of like trying to trick you into giving up touchdowns because we're not good enough to just beat you man to man. Now, that might be changing with some of the recruiting that Tennessee's doing. I'll be the first to admit that, be the first to tip my cap to it. Like things are moving in a direction now that is different. And I'm very interested to see how 2024 plays out. But I mean, essentially, I think football is about at every position, taking space from the person across from you. The offense is trying to, not give up space on the line. They're trying to take it on the outside and, vice versa, basically on the defensive side of the ball. And the Heupel offense is really not about taking space so much as it is about taking given space. Like it is taking the space that you are surrendering. It is not forcefully, breaking your will. Like it is not an offense that you look at and think these guys are going to go on like an 8.5, 9.5 minute death march in the fourth quarter and just like take your soul out of your body by, just moving you back 3 or 4 or 5 yards at a time over and over while the clock drains and you can't get the ball back and there's nothing you can do about it. Again, maybe that changes with some of the recruiting that is happening, but it's very opposite of what football has been for a long time. And in some ways that's extremely innovative. And in some ways, I'm not sure when you get to the highest levels of the sport, if that dog will hunt.
It's interesting. I was going back and I was reading. Did you read the Joe Rexrode column on Tennessee's offense from a couple of years ago that talked to all these different coaches?
I did not.
I'm going to drop in the chat. And this is something to maybe circle back on and like even off air. But it's something that I thought was really interesting, especially like Saban being so curious about the Baylor offense before it got to the SEC. And I think he was expecting it to get to the SEC at some point, and this kind of thing. And it's obviously not the same. There are different variations, and you talk about it. Like, and one of the things, Heupel, he played in a different scheme. Obviously, he won a national title playing a different way at Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
The way he managed Drew Lock at Mizzou was different than the way he coached at Utah State. It was different than the way he coached Dylan Gabriel at UCF. The offense last year was extremely different with Joe Milton than what you did with Hendon Hooker. I think Heupel, one of the things that I think is going to continue to happen is he's going to continue to evolve, and he's going to evolve to his personnel, but most specifically, he's going to evolve to what his quarterback can do and what his quarterback can be really good at. And you and I, in our offseason conversations, one of the things that makes Nico so fascinating for Heupel in Tennessee this year is that like he has the potential to evolve this Heupel offense more than any quarterback Heupel's ever had. So it's just so interesting to think about what it could be and how much more he is able to do and how much more he's able to unlock, because we've seen still the best version of this offense. It just raises the floor, because for so many teams, they just can't match up in a random week 6 matchup against Tennessee, like in this Heupel offense. Like you're going to get crushed because you can't really prepare for it during the week. And if you get behind early, they just bury you. Like Tennessee can just there's a reason Tennessee doesn't really get upset all that often, is because they just, when they get going and this offense has momentum early on, it's really hard to stop those wheels in motion. And it's also a mean offense where like they will just target Jalen Hyatt over and over again. They'll just target Jalen Wright over and over again. They'll do whatever the weakness is, they're just going to keep doing that. And it's kind of like when Dan Mullen at his best at Florida, where he's like, you can't stop the wheel route with Kyle Pitts. Like, I'm just going to keep doing, like, why would I stop this? Like there's no answer for this. And I think Heupel is really, really good at that. But Nico unlocks other things potentially.
Well, yeah. So you covered a lot of ground there. I think that before I get to Nico, I would say you're right. Like I've written, in my deep dive previews for 3 years now about this offense, and going into that 2022 game, not just the week of, but for a few weeks before, because you could kind of see this collision course coming after Tennessee beat Alabama. I really started like watching a lot of Tennessee's, offensive snaps and finding cut up tape and trying to understand it, trying to understand what the rules were, trying to, understand what the goal was. And essentially, the Jalen Hyatt 5 touchdown thing against Alabama was the perfect example of like, you're right. Josh Heupel, his game is find the duck, right? Like I'm going to find the duck, and we're going to keep exploiting that matchup over and over and over. And that's great when that matchup exists on the field. The problem is that when it doesn't, you get back-to-back weeks of 36-7 against Missouri and 38-10 against Georgia like you did last year. And I think that is that is the evolution that I think you want to see in the Heupel offense if you're a Tennessee fan is what are our solves when we don't step onto the field and just have a clear matchup that we can kind of take advantage of over and over. Because to get to the highest level and to go and win games in a college football playoff in this 12-team format, because I think Tennessee's going to be able to make the 12-team playoff under Heupel with what they're doing. But to go and like beat some of these teams that you're going to have to beat to go win this whole thing, I think you're going to have to respect the fact that, like, yeah, you know, like Ohio State, they are going to trot out a bunch of 5-star corners and safeties. And like, there's not going to be some guy that we put out there that's just faster than the man across from him, or that just beats him with inside leverage on a slant every time off the line of scrimmage. And when you know, are kind of relying on the numbers game, like, it's interesting because, you know, the way Georgia beat Tennessee in 2022 was they had this light box and they were able to Tennessee and stop the run with the light box when nobody else was able to all year. And they were able, I mean, like, they played inside leverage in the beginning of the game. They took away some of these slants and stuff, and they forced Hendon Hooker into a second read. And it just
So is that just a personnel thing,
off.
or like why weren't other teams able to do what Kirby did against Tennessee in 2022?
I think a lot of it's a personnel thing. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, what was interesting is that the moment that kind of like unlocked things for me in terms of, okay, like, I think, because at the moment, like, going into that 2022 Georgia Tennessee game, it felt like to everybody that stopped. Like, it was this big, scary it, like, sit on some of these inside routes and some of the things that they did with Hooker on kind of delayed blitzes, and like you had a spy who was taking off sometimes, like a rat hole kind of coverage guy. And it was just very, very similar to what Georgia ended up doing. But like, that to me, I was like, that's the recipe. Like, Pitt had the recipe. They just didn't have the personnel to, you know, bring it all the way from oven to table at, you know, at the condition that you wanted to, because they lost that game in overtime. But I think a lot of it is personnel. And I think that the question is that, like, when you get to those highest levels of games, occasionally you do have like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or somebody like that, you know, that's just that good. But most of the time, I feel like, you know, those games are won in the trenches, and you have a receiver who might get open on one play, but he's not getting open on every play, right? Like, it's a back and forth, and it's not just really like this clear matchup advantage. And you know, at that, you know, at position over and over and over, like, you got to kind of scheme your way into it. And that's the question. What is Heupel solves, and does Nico open up a new avenue of potential ways for him to kind of solve that problem? And I think if he lets Nico play outside the rules of that system in a way that's different than he did with Hendon Hooker, then the answer to that could be yes. And I thought that was sort of the biggest weakness that I saw in 2022 Tennessee, was that there was a ton of predictability to it. And so, you know, if you got to a team that was able to stop what you do, then what happens next? And we never really found out, honestly. Like, we never saw the answer to that. It was just kind of like, well, we're going to keep trying to do what we do, and hopefully it's going to break through eventually. And it never really did against Georgia in that game. But does Nico's legs open up a new element? Does he extend plays? You know, like, what's the story there? And that's the fascinating side of this.
Well, it's the combination of his, because I think Nico, one of the more frustrating things about Joe last year was that Joe had like, one of the reasons Tennessee was up and had Alabama on their toes again, this time in Tuscaloosa last year, was like Joe was taking off and they were running some RPO stuff, and Joe was, I mean, they were doing some speed option stuff. Like, Joe was just flat out running and lowering his shoulder and just taking a toll on dudes, because Joe's size was like, he's built like Cam Newton, but he just didn't do it. And he also just didn't have that kind of instinct to know when to take off like Hendon did. Hendon just knew when things were over and was like, all right, I'm going to go get this first down. Like the all-time annoying guy who just absolutely crushed Tennessee with this 3 years ago now, because time flies, was Matt Corral. The Ole Miss Tennessee game was a masterclass, and nothing being there.
That was a great game in general. Yeah.
It was a great game and normal ending and all that good stuff. But Matt Corral would just live for 4th and 6 and 3rd and 8 and would just find ways to just dance around and still get the first down and live to fight another day. There wasn't a lot of live to fight another day last year, where it just, the drives ended quickly. And one of the things I'd written down, because I think a lot of people were excited about Milton after a good Iowa, like a good Orange Bowl performance against Clemson. But the problem was, like, one of the different things that stood out to me was, like, he took a lot of sacks. It was like, that's something that was a little bit different than Hooker. And he also had a lot of quick 3 and outs. Like, that was one of those things where if the guys were open and like, one of the things with Tennessee to this point, I think what's going to be different this year is just they're so deep on the defensive line. I think the defense has progressively gotten a little bit better each year under Tim Banks and company, and they hired well. Like William Inge was a good defensive coordinator at Washington, like bringing him in as linebackers coach and working with Tim Banks. Like that's a big win. Rodney Gardner, that you know well, he's one of the best defensive line coaches in the sport. Like he's been extremely good. Willie Martinez, also an old friend, back at Georgia, he's recruited well, and Kamal Hadden obviously broke out and was good for them last year, but they're getting more talent in the secondary. The thing I look at it is like, okay, you can't have those kind of quick 3 and outs with the kind of defensive personnel they had last year, because they just get themselves in a hole and they just could not get off the field on 3rd down. And when you have an offense that can quickly go 3 and out, and the defense that's on the field as much as Tennessee is, it's just a recipe for issues. And they had that all year long. And this year, I think what's going to be different in a lot of ways, and maybe the best reasons for optimism, is like, I think Nico is going to extend a lot of drives. Like I think Nico is going to be in a lot of spots where you're not going to have a lot of those quick 3 and outs. And then you're like, all right, defense, bend, don't break, just get us back on the field for another opportunity. I think Nico is going to find ways to extend drive, but you're also going to have to balance. And this is something that Tennessee had to be very careful with Hendon 2 years ago, is like, yeah, he's great with his legs, but you have to pick your spots. Like Hendon did not run against every team. You have to be careful. It's like Florida, sorry, buddy, you got to take off. Alabama, you're gonna have to take off and take these hits and get back up. I think he lost like 4 teeth or something in the Alabama game in 2021 off a bad hit. Like you're gonna have to take some shots in these big spots. And Nico, we haven't seen that. Like Iowa, like he ran all over Iowa, but he didn't really take any big hits. He took some sacks, but it wasn't all that physical. It's a bowl game. It's, we don't have to relitigate what a bowl game is now, a non-playoff game. I am curious how Tennessee handles that, because they're really young behind him, obviously with Jake Merglayer, a true freshman, and then Gaston Moore, former walk-on, who transferred in with Heupel when he came over from UCF. But like it's going to be very interesting, because you have to keep him healthy and you also have to run him. And that's something we saw last year in this offense. And I wonder if you agree, is that like, I don't know if this works without a non-dual threat quarterback. Like you just have to have somebody who is comfortable and has good instincts on when to take off. I don't think you can have a stationary prototypical drop back passer in this offense and expect to really unlock everything I don't know. Do you agree?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can have a true straight up drop back passer much anywhere in college at this point. Like
Michael Penix Jr. last year CJ Stroud was basically doing that. He at Ohio State. There's been dudes who still do that.
But like CJ Stroud also like used his legs in the 4th quarter of that Georgia game and put them in position to kick a game-winning field goal with like a 36-yard run. Like he didn't like to, but he could when the chips were down. Carson Beck, I think, is certainly a pocket passer, but like he will keep it on his own read occasionally just to keep you honest. That's really what you need. I agree with you. I think you have to have some level of mobility. Like you don't maybe have to be a true dual threat, but like Drew Lock, right? Like he was super successful in a Heupel offense. Mackenzie Milton, right? Like those guys, like, do I think of them as like the model of a dual threat quarterback? No, like they're not Michael Vick or anything, but they do have some athleticism, certainly. What concerns me about Nico, quite frankly, is you're right. We did see him run against Iowa, and he ran beautifully. Like, he did that very, very well. And, I think the interesting thing was there were some designed runs in the game for him. It wasn't just all him like taking off on a scramble. I think what scares me for him, and I think what needs to be answered for him is that game. He was what? He was pressured. Well, I guess totally last year, he was under pressure 21 times, and he was sacked 7. And his average time to throw and when under pressure is 4.34 seconds, right? Like, that's a small sample set. We've only seen him start one game, so I wouldn't overreact to it yet. But the thing that I would overreact to, or not overreact to, but at least put a pin in, is 21 snaps under pressure last year, and he only threw the ball 8 times. So it's like, is he, I think that is the evolution for most young quarterbacks, right? Is like, when pressure comes, I don't panic and put my eyes on the rushers. I keep my eyes downfield, and I create, because with those receivers and that spacing and all of that, like, there should be a lot of opportunities for guys to come back for him and for him to deliver the ball downfield. It's just, will that be something that he learns in the month of September and, goes on and does, or is that something that we don't see from him until 2025 or ever? It's just like, there's some guys that they figure it out on a short curve, and there's some guys that figure it out on a long curve, and there's some guys that never figure it out at all. Now, he's got all of these tremendous physical gifts. So you sit there and you look at him, and like, you're very excited with the potential of what he can be, because it's like, well, if he does figure this out, it's going to be insane, right? But I think that Iowa game is so hard to understand, really, man, because like, that Iowa defense was this very unique animal, and it was kind of the situation where it was like, well, if Tennessee doesn't turn the ball over, they're going to win the game. So there was a lot of reason to be risk averse in that game. But it is interesting, just on the whole, like, he took 31 dropbacks in that game, and he only threw 19 passes. So that would tell me, maybe Iowa has a really good secondary, and they did have a really good secondary. I think we could all agree. But it's like, that is the same problem that we saw with Joe Milton. That is the same problem that we saw with Hendon Hooker against the Georgias and the best teams that they played that year. Really, only Georgia was the only team that could do it to them. But
well, can we
that
point
is the
that
problem
out
with
too?
What's happening when we get to that second read. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's the thing. I think people who overthink some of the Heupel stuff to me is, like, outside of Georgia, I just, like, if Georgia's your last major roadblock, things are really good. Like, they've been wandering the wilderness
Sure.
for 20 years. And if Georgia, the best program in the country the last 4 years, a team that's not lost a regular season home game since 2019, is the one who you're still struggling to solve 4 years into your time at your university, that's a really good place to be in. Because by and large, like, the Mizzou stuff last year, it's a road. I think Heupel's 4-4 on the road the last 2 years, and SEC play.
29-16 at Florida. I mean, like, that, that was tough.
But
I mean, like, they went 8-4. I mean, like, they're Tennessee. Like,
yeah.
I mean, like, Tennessee. I grew up on Tennessee winning and competing for national championships, right? So, like,
yeah, he's lost one home game in the last 2 years. Like, he's lost one home game. And I mean, you swept Alabama and Florida. I read about this today, and it's ready to go live at a later date. But I mean, the part of what's going to be interesting this year with the schedule with Heupel and everything, like, I guess these are 2 separate conversations, but you just don't know what matchups you're going to get in the CFP too. It's just like, get in. We're turning into a playoff sport. So if Heupel has a floor so high with Tennessee that if you can get into the playoff, like, I think they're going to match up really well. And I think if Nico lives up to the billing, it's someone no one wants. Like, you don't want Knoxville and Neyland Stadium specifically hosting a round one playoff game against it. Like, nobody wants to come into Tennessee for that, because Tennessee will be favored.
You would not.
No.
Especially in the cold, wet Appalachian.
No.
You and I both
don't
know
want
what that feels
any
like
part
in
of that.
December.
Yeah, you want no part of that.
No, you don't. You certainly
But
do not.
there are
No,
some
it's-
teams, like you said, Ohio State, Georgia, they're going to run into some problems. But like that's a great spot to be in. If that's your final boss and you're like, I don't know. Do you get what I'm
But
saying? Where
all right,
just
so
it's
yeah, no, I
fine.
hear what you're saying, and I think within the context of everything that Tennessee football was prior to him getting there, what you're saying makes a ton of sense. This is also though like why I continue to kind of half jokingly say to you when we talk about some of these things, like Heupel is not going to be the guy. Like for like you guys, by you guys I mean Tennessee fans. Tennessee fans will grow tired of this. Like they will grow tired of, being 9-3, but you're not really competitive with the three best teams on your schedule. And I think that's look, 2022 was a really special year, and what they did to Alabama was stunning on a lot of levels. I guess the question you should also ask, and I ask, is like, okay, Heupel gets to evolve, but I think when what happened in 2022 happened, it kind of put everybody in the SEC on notice. And I think attention started getting paid in the offseason to like, almost like the way that you would spend a week or two in the offseason planning for a triple option team that's on your schedule. Now I think you do that with Heupel. And so it's just a question of like, there's always, offense always kind of seems to take the step forward, and the defense always kind of comes and meets it at that level. And this has been going on for 100 years in our sport. Like, are we going to continue to see some of these staffs that haven't quite figured out Heupel yet? Like, like Missouri last year was really good on the back end, right? Like they had two good boundary corners, but like that wasn't a blue chip ratio roster. That wasn't a team that had like recruited at some insanely high level. So it's like, well, I would imagine that, Kentucky and South Carolina and whoever else that Tennessee plays, like they're going to go and probably watch what Missouri did more than they're going to watch what Georgia did, because Georgia has options to do things that only, 2 or 3, 5 programs in the country can do. Missouri, however, like if Missouri starts solving you, if Florida starts solving you on some level, then, maybe they figured something out. I think at the end of the day, honestly, like, there's a lot of oversimplifications that probably happen with Heupel. Like that Georgia game in 2022 created this narrative of like, well, if you can stop the run with the light box, you can stop Tennessee. It's like, well, that helps, but like having a couple really good, a couple guys that were like future second round boundary corners with length and speed to be on space was good. The fact that Georgia gets off blocks on the outside and stops these little screens, like, and takes away the free yards, that's part of it. Like there is more than
there are also
one
some key
thing that has
drops
to
going
happen.
back in that one. There were some close misses, and you just can't miss in the margins against Georgia. There were some margin ones, like Tillman
That's
had
true.
one, and a couple where, like you got to have those gimmies.
Issue.
Yeah.
But it's hard to call a 50-yard pass a gimme, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, when you look at the course of the whole season, yeah, like those were huge.
Yeah.
I mean, Georgia hit on those. Like I think Stetson hit one. Like I think it was Arian Smith early in that one. Like he had a big bomb at some. Like if I remember correctly.
Smith,
yeah. Like those are huge, and I think Tennessee just missed their spots. Like they missed their moments in those. They had 3 or 4 where like you just can't miss those and have a chance.
I think that's the criticism, though, right? Is like,
yeah,
you're playing deep ball roulette, and is that what you want your program and your season and all of that to be kind of like reliant on? Is we're going to throw 4 deep balls or 6 deep balls a half, and if we catch half of those, we probably win. We probably win the game. If we don't, then we probably lose the game. Yeah. And so I think it comes down to, everybody wants explosive plays, but you have to be able to drive the field in small chunks against, I think, some of these really, really high level defenses. And
if you don't play those, or if you're better, like that's the final thing we like on the Tennessee Georgia front and we can put a bow on it, is we're now at a point where you and I have talked about this privately of like, what happens when Heupel gets an elite class and he starts stacking like elite blue chip talent, and Tennessee's in the blue chip ratio. What does that look like? What evolution? Because I mean, Tennessee has the best defensive line in the SEC this year, and what does that do for Tennessee's upside? What does having only blue chip receivers and a multitude of options who can get open, tight ends who are just like Ethan Davis, at Collins Hill. Like he is going to be, if he's healthy, a really, really good playmaker at the tight end spot. Like, what's going to happen if they're stacking 4 and 5-star offensive linemen that are going to be able to better protect their star quarterbacks? Like, I think this is now a gigantic portion of the Josh Heupel era where they were ahead of schedule and then they took a step back last year. And now the next 2 to 3 is what's going to define whether or not Heupel's here for 10 to 15 years, like a 10 to 15 year run, like a Mark Richt run at Georgia, or it's like a Dan Mullen run at Florida where it's actually like 5 or so years. Like, we're about to find out if it pivots back to closer to 2022 just with stacked talent and like, oh, there's another evolution to this. And so, like, this offense is somehow even scarier with only 4 and 5 stars out wide and at quarterback and a defensive line that just crushes people week over week and puts you in a blender. Like, that's interesting. Like, that's why this is going to be so much fun.
It is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the dog that catches the car, right? Like, I mean, Art Briles invented this offense. I don't think Heupel would argue with me saying that. Like, I don't think, most football people would argue with me saying that. I'm not saying Heupel hasn't had other evolutions of it, but like the basic concept of the blur or whatever you want to call it, the hyper spread, like that was a Briles thing. And he did it in order to basically deal with talent deficiencies on the offensive line, a quarterback that wasn't that great, like this is an offense that was designed to deal with talent deficiencies. So what happens when it's not talent deficient? And that is, if he is so married to it that nothing happens as more talent comes in and, Tennessee continues to refuse to run into a heavy box, even though it's got 5-star offensive linemen to push defensive linemen back at the snap, like if it gets to a spot where it is capable of taking space and it won't, then Tennessee fans will probably grow quite tired of it very quickly. If it evolves, then I think you're right. I think Heupel can have a Fulmer type run.
Yeah. But it's going to be fun. Either way, I'm excited for football to be back, and I am very, very excited to see how it all unfolds. But optimistic, I think, is how people should look into it. And, I think it's a good problem to have. And either way, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it all unfolds. Hater or homer here, Graham Coffey. Florida will have a better record than South Carolina, Kentucky, and Missouri this fall. I've been sitting on this for a little bit. What do you think? Hater or homer? Which way are you going with this take?
Wait, which one is yes and which one's no?
Hater is you don't think this is the case and you think Florida will be worse than those 4 records. Or homer, you'll go, yeah, no, Florida is absolutely not going to have a good season.
You said South Carolina, Missouri, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they'll have a better record than Missouri for sure. So I'm going to go hater. Yeah. I mean, I think
put them
Florida's
on a neutral site. Do you think they'd be better? They'd be favored if Florida and Mizzou played on a neutral site this year?
I think it'd be a 3-point game kind of thing. Yeah.
I don't think Mizzou fans would see it that way because I think they've really. I mean, I'm really excited to see what they look like post Blake Baker, and I'm very curious to see. I wish Mizzou was on this calendar. Mizzou and South Carolina, they blew out last year, so I'm not as dying to see South Carolina calendar for Tennessee. But not getting the Mizzou revenge game really annoys me. Like, us not getting Mizzou at home this year really, really bothers me. Like, I really don't like it because I'm, as you can tell from this question.
That was becoming a really fun rivalry. I'm sad that we're not even as a non-invested party, I'm sad that we're not going to get to watch it. That had kind of become something that I looked forward to.
I mean, it was getting petty. Like November. Both teams were very much relishing blowing out the other the last 2 years.
We stand on business, Josh. Nobody's sounded more, unserious saying we stand on business than Eli Drinkwitz did in that moment. But I like Eli. I think he's a funny character. I think he's actually very, very intelligent as well. But
it's just like one of those things too.
Another conversation.
Last year did happen. It was just like one of those where like Tennessee almost dropped 70. They could have dropped 80 if they wanted to on you the year prior. Like, yeah, it's a good win. Like, you got at home, but like let's calm it down a little bit. And also Tennessee, I think the previous 2 years, because Tennessee with the first year of Heupel, they ran for like 800 yards on Mizzou on the road. So it's like, all right, you got one. It's still 2-1. And like, let's just calm down. You're having a good year. You're still Mizzou. Let's calm it down. Let's calm it down. And maybe he knew that they weren't going to be on the schedule next year. That irritated me so much. That was so silly.
Oh, I'm sure Tennessee fans hated it. I mean, almost as I mean, I just remember that game, Heupel going for that field goal at the end to make a 36-7 game, 36-10. It's like, when you can turn a 4-possession game into a 4-possession game, you got to do it, right?
I don't know why. I would actually like to ask him about that. Like, why that was
because he's petty. He's just as petty as he's just as petty as Drinkwitz, and that's what makes it fun. I mean, like,
yeah.
I remember.
What's the Kirby equivalent? What's the pettiest thing Kirby's
Kirby equivalent is that probably the pettiest thing I've seen Kirby call in game was, he'll always twist the knife on Florida for sure. Like, he'll always leave starters in late to, he's not running reverse passes, but like he'll just run it down their throat. But the pettiest thing I ever saw Kirby do was the 2018 Georgia Auburn game. They scored a touchdown at the end to go up like 28-7 or something, or like 23-7 or something like that. And on the extra point, Kirby ran a pass with Hot Rod with Rodrigo Blankenship, where Rodrigo Blankenship threw the ball. It was incomplete, but I was like, man, that's some real hate there. So that was special.
Did he do something at South Carolina a couple years ago? Didn't he do something strange to South Carolina?
Oh, that was the so that wasn't really, I mean, that was petty in a different way, but yeah. So South Carolina ran a fake punt in the first half. And they got it the first time, and then Spencer Rattler threw an interception like 3 plays later, and Georgia goes and scores. Like, Georgia won that game like 48-7 or something. Like they stomped a mud hole in South Carolina. But again, like later on in the first half, I think Beamer calls for another fake punt, and Georgia stops it. And there was a clip of like Kirby like screaming across the sideline and doing first down motion, and you can see him saying first down MFer. Yeah. So look, one of the more favorite Dog Central posts of all time was the chronicling of the Beamer Smart relationship that I actually wrote prior to that game, because like both coaches say nice things about each other game week in the media at a press conference, but they do not like each other at all. And Beamer worked for Kirby, so there's some interesting history there. But yeah, you kind of saw it come out there in the middle of that game.
Do you think it's number one? Is that the most active like SEC coach that Kirby like does not get along with? Is it Beamer?
That's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know. Like I mean, like, he's very good about hiding those things. I think.
Yeah. Who do you think in the SEC? Who do you think is the most obvious they don't like each other coaches in the SEC? Who would you guess?
I mean, I think Drink and Heupel is up there for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's I was probably Beamer and Stoops, actually. That's the biggest. I would say those two hate each other. Like, hate each other. A couple years ago,
that's a huge
media days,
game too, by the way. Week 2, that game being week 2 is wild.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Stoops, it's Kentucky, so Stoops isn't going to be on a hot seat, but like, Beamer loses that game.
The reason I bring that up, this kind of brings it full circle. When you look at the schedule, especially South Carolina, their schedule's brutal. Like, everyone talks about Florida's schedule. One of the things that's going to help Florida is, we've seen Mario Cristobal lose in crazy ways. Like, I don't care that Miami should beat Florida in week 1 on the road. Like, they should do it. I am not going to predict Miami to win at Florida in week 1. I'm not going to do it. Utah should have won at Florida. Like, there is winning in the swamp is just difficult. Tennessee fans have the House of Horrors winning in Gainesville. Like, it's just, the swamp is different. I think Florida should win that game. But then you look at it, I think Florida has a good chance of being undefeated going into the Tennessee game. And then who knows? Because Tennessee-Florida is always weird.
Oh, man. It's tough to predict. Yeah, I know what you're saying, though.
But there's reason for optimism that Florida gets off to a really hot start. Like, I would not be surprised at all if Florida, because they go to Mississippi State, they get A&M at home, they get Sanford, and they get UCF at home. Like, I think at worst, that's a 4-1 start going into Tennessee, and then anything can happen there. But then you get Kentucky at home, which is weird because Kentucky has beaten Florida 3 straight times, which is just absolutely insane as you and I growing up, and just the streak that Florida had over Kentucky, that Kentucky's got 3 straight, is absolutely insane. But yeah, I mean, obviously the back end's terrible, but you still get Ole Miss at home. You still get LSU at home. I think people who are looking at this being a disaster 3-9 type year, like, oh, the schedule, like, it's a tough schedule, but there's a lot of important swing games at home here. And I just am
there are.
Yeah.
No, there are. And I mean, like, they are good. I mean, good is a relative term, but like, I think they are going to be better than people are giving them credit for sure. I think that I really am kind of sneaky high on Texas A&M. So I think they'll lose that game. Truthfully,
they just need Wegman to be healthy, but you can't count on Wegman being healthy at this point, right? Like, he needs to be upright.
There's some truth there, but I think that Elko brings a level of organization and groundedness to them that.
But think about that. They get Notre Dame at home first. I mean, then going to Florida not too long after. Like, A&M's right out of the gate here. Welcome to the show. Like that Will Ferrell.
I think they're going to beat Notre Dame at home to start the year. I think that.
Interesting. So you have them beating Notre Dame and Florida on the road to kick things off. You're all in on the Aggies.
I think that's like my outside chance playoff sleeper. I could see them going 9-3, but with the right wins, like sneaking in as a 10 or 11 seed.
Final one here, Graham. Hater or Homer?
Hater or Homer?
Yeah.
I ask myself that every day, buddy.
Either way, we still love you, Graham. Texas. This is just, I'm serving you up a 65 mile an hour underhand toss for this one, because I know where you're going with this. Hater or Homer? Texas does not have a better record than Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Tennessee this year.
So they don't have a better record than any of those teams?
Yeah, they don't finish with a better record than any of those teams.
I'm very down on Oklahoma. Like, I think Oklahoma is gonna, struggle to. Anytime you replace 5 offensive line starters in the SEC, you're in a world of trouble. And that is Oklahoma's situation. So I could see Oklahoma beating Texas just because of the nature of that rivalry. I could see anything happening in that game.
Beat them last year.
But yeah, they did. I mean, like, look, Texas, they got to go to Michigan in week 2. And I don't think Alex Orji is going to be a super dynamic quarterback in terms of stretching the field and certain things. But like, I do think that I know that Texas is replacing 2 All-American defensive tackles with a guy named Bill Norton, who left Georgia in the middle of the 2022 national title run before the playoff because he wasn't going to play on the field, and went out to Arizona, had a nice season in the Pac-12. But like, what you're doing in the Pac-12 and who you're doing it against is a lot different than trying to play nose at Texas against Michigan's defense, or Michigan's offensive line, Georgia's offensive line. Some of these teams they play now. Texas has been gifted, and if Texas doesn't make the playoff with this schedule, it is an embarrassing failure for everyone involved, especially with all of the hype and all of the like ass kissing that has gone on around Texas coming into the league. But I think they lose to Michigan. I think Georgia blows them out in Austin. Like, I don't think that game is going to be close in the fourth quarter. I think Georgia beats them by.
Does it matter how the Oklahoma 17. Game goes the week prior, or no?
In terms of how you think, like, in terms of how it affects the outcome of the Georgia game?
Yeah. Do you think that matters? Like, depending on if Texas gets over the Oklahoma hump, does that change how you look at it? Or if they get blown out by Oklahoma or embarrassed, and the idea of them getting blown out back to back week?
I think, Oklahoma either proves they're fraudulent, or they beat Oklahoma and they come in a little overconfident. I don't know. It's hard to say at this moment, honestly.
But you feel really good about Georgia and Austin.
I do. I feel better about Georgia and Austin than I do in Tuscaloosa or Oxford. I'll say that. If I had to pick one of those 3 games that I feel like certain Georgia's going to win, that would be the one I would pick. It's not
What's
that I
the
feel
ranking
bad
there?
about
What's the
them
1
in
through
those other
3?
2 games.
What's the 1 through 3 and most confident you're winning to least confident?
1 would be Texas. I keep struggling with the whole Ole Miss thing, but the more I dig into them, the more I think like there's a lot of high upside potential there. So I'll say 1 Texas, 2 Alabama. No, I can't do that. 1 Texas, 2 Ole Miss, 3 Alabama. Alabama, look, man, I've watched Georgia lose to Alabama a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. Like, I got to see that before.
It's like the Florida game for us, where you're like, I just need to see it happen.
Well, it's like the Florida game used to be for Georgia. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
It's not because they beat them in a title game, but like still, it's just going into Bryant Denny. I still have to wrap my head around, that whole situation for sure. But yeah, I think with Texas, like you're still probably going to end up 9-3 or so. Like, but if they go 9-3 against that schedule, then they don't like. I got A&M beating them to end the year in College Station. I think they lose to A&M in College Station. I think they lose to Georgia, and I think they lose at least 1 more. I wouldn't be shocked if Florida knocked them off or Arkansas. Arkansas and Fayetteville.
Well, that's not Texas a playoff team. Then
seems to. No, exactly. That's my point. So, yeah, I'm gonna go. I still think that Texas will have a better record than Oklahoma at the end of the year, but I certainly do not think they will have a better record than Georgia or Alabama. And with Tennessee, I'll be honest with you, man. I'm coming around on the upside potential of Tennessee. Hard for me to see them losing a game before, mid-October. I could see them coming to Athens undefeated, honestly. Like if everything really
here's the
clicks
problem.
with
Can I make
Nico.
a case as to why? And this is not to spoil a column I just read about it. One of the things that scares me about this schedule is Tennessee. Nico had like the biggest home field advantage, or the biggest upside to Tennessee in 2022 was they got Pitt at Pitt, won in overtime. It was a crazy, and like it woke them up where it's like, okay, cool, we survived that one. Tennessee has that against a better team at NC State. It's going to be a neutral site game. Nico's first road test. I think it's going to be more Tennessee fans, but like NC State's good, and Gibson's defense and the Wolfpack, like that's going to be a hard fought game. I think. Still, the NC State track record against SEC teams is really bad. So Tennessee, I still would say, is going to win that game. But it's going to be close, is my guess. And it's going to be tough. Then you get a Kent State team break. But then you have to go to Oklahoma, bye, then to a potentially desperate Arkansas team on the road, where I think that's just going to be a score fest. Or I think both offenses are just going to put up a ridiculous amount of points. I think Petrino and Taylor Green, and then Nico and Heupel, I think it's going to be like a 45, 35 type game. And then
if you guys give up 35 to Arkansas, then I take back all the things I just said about the potential.
I'm just expecting, like a lot of people I was talking with Tennessee Fall Sports guys. I'm like, there's something about the Arkansas game that's just everyone's overlooking it. It's on the road, and it's just going to be weird. Maybe it's like Mizzou 3 years ago when they went up there and just ran all out. Like people were like, "Oh, is this?" And then it was like, "No, they're just bad." Like it was just one of those where Mizzou fired their defensive line coach literally after the game. Because Tennessee and Tion Evans and company just ran all over them to an unreal degree that they had a coaching change after that game. But I just think Tennessee in 2022, the schedule evened out in a way where they had Florida early. They don't play Florida until October 12th. That's the first time they're going to be able to use their home field advantage to their strength. And Nico, with a new quarterback, you would like to have one of Arkansas or Oklahoma at home to start the year, because starting with 2 road SEC games out of the gate, along with a neutral site against a top 15, 17 team against NC State, to ask that Nico and company go 3-0 in that stretch, I think he's just asking a lot. Like my gut is they lose one of those 3. I don't know which one, but I think they drop one. And then you have Florida
of the Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas triumvirate,
and NC State. Like, I think of those three, I think they drop.
I'm sorry, the NC State, Oklahoma. Yeah.
I think they drop one.
Look,
But
man, if that
then
happens, then I need to stop. I need you to stop with all this Heupel. Is the second coming.
Losing at Oklahoma's fine. Like, it's an emotional game. It's tough. It's Nico's first road SEC game. Like, they're not going to be favored.
It's not, dude. It's not. I don't want to hear all this playoff contender. You can
still be a playoff contender.
5 stars away.
You're not out yet.
Dude, if that Tennessee defensive line goes and loses to an Oklahoma team with 5 new offensive line starters, that is a massive, something went wrong on the scheme side of things or on the development side of things from a Tennessee standpoint.
Yeah, maybe. I've just seen enough road SEC games with Heupel to this point to know that these, it's just going to get weird in one of these two games. I don't know which one, but it's going to get weird in one of those two, and it's going to be painful, is my guess. But I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But then you have Florida and Alabama back-to-back. And Florida is always going to be an emotional last-second home game. Like, it took Anthony Richardson had the ball in his hands with the chance to win against Tennessee in 2022. Like, they came back, the onside kick, everything. Tennessee was a much better team, and it still almost gave away that game at home at the very end. Like, Florida could have easily stole that game. My gut is that's still going to come down to, the final possession. It's going to get weird, and it's going to be an emotional. It's going to be if they're able to escape with the win, as they should, they're going to be a lot. It's going to take out a lot out of that team. And then you're like, okay, get back up off the mat, and now you got to go beat Alabama too in back-to-back weeks. In 2022, Tennessee beat Florida, and then they went to LSU and got a great gift, an 11 a.m. kick, and took full advantage of not having a night game in Baton Rouge and blew out LSU. So then they just feel great against Alabama, undefeated. They just blew out LSU on the road. Everything's rolling on all cylinders. It was the right recipe for upsetting Alabama and having all of these good vibes and feeling like you could compete against anybody. I just don't know if the schedule sets up for that for Tennessee this year. I wish there were more SEC home games to kick things off to ease Nico into it. I wish the bye was in a different spot. I don't like Florida and Alabama back to back, even if they're both at home. That's a lot to ask for your first year, no matter how good of a quarterback Nico is going to be. That's just asking a lot to get through that unscathed. And then my thing is, I'm predicting is I think Tennessee has 2 losses going into the Georgia game, and the Georgia game is a CFP elimination game, is my guess. Is Tennessee will have to upset Georgia to make the playoff, and if they don't, they'll finish 9-3, probably win a bowl game, get 10-3. But I think that's my gut, is Georgia is a CFP elimination game for Tennessee.
That's interesting. It's not how I've looked at Tennessee's schedule. I've looked at the front half, kind of. Look, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, man. This is, by the standards of the new SEC, an easy schedule. It is. It's not the easiest by any means. I'm not saying that it's not Texas's schedule, but it is a pretty easy schedule. It is a manageable schedule, certainly. And, with the experience that Tennessee has coming back on the line of scrimmage, I think Heupel kind of needs to make a playoff.
I think they're making playoffs in the next 2 years. I don't know which year.
I'm not sure if you feel, I guess some of it depends on the developmental curve of Nico that we were talking about earlier, but I'm still not sure, if Tennessee is going to have a defensive line quite like the one they're going to have this year. It's hard to say they're at a spot yet with their recruiting where they reload yearly on the defensive line. They're building towards that, but they're not quite there yet, in my opinion.
Yeah, we'll see.
It'll be fascinating. I mean, I'm sure people will be yelling at me, that Voldemort guy or whoever. You guys have some great characters in Tennessee Twitter. Some of them are hilarious and good natured and really fun to talk to, and will actually engage you in some interesting football debate. And some of them are just no, Heupel is the best coach ever, and I hate you, sir. And I hope that I'm going to look up some pictures of your family on the internet now and send them to you. So,
Don't do that, folks.
Yeah. Love that when that happens. But hey, man, what I'm really looking forward to is Tennessee, Georgia, and Athens this year. I do, like I said, Tennessee fans, remember this when you see me next or interact with me on the internets. I think there's a chance that could be like a similar type of build up to the 2022 Tennessee Georgia game. And you and I are going to be there to do some, pregame festivities together, probably do this in person.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to all that. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I hope the Tennessee fans that come down to Athens for that game come hang out with us and, are a part of it all.
It's going to be good. And like you said, it'll be fun this fall. I mean, I'll be nervous walking into enemy territory that way. And it depends on what Tennessee is looking like. Tennessee undefeated. Graham Coffey won't. I'm gonna be like Ric Flair over here. I might have to just order some chains just to be ready to go. To be ready for what kind of mood I'm gonna be in that Friday night before kickoff. Because Graham Coffey won't even be able to handle it. I don't think.
Hey, I'm excited for it. I want to see it. The beautiful part about college football is it makes life happen at an amplified sound level. Like feelings are big and the swings are big and all of that. And I think that's why we love it. I think it's why it's memorable. I think that's why we mark time with like where we were when some of these events happened, because the emotions of them are so big that it's impossible to not have them kind of seared into your psyche.
Absolutely. Graham Coffey, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Dawgs Central and TPL Georgia this week?
Yeah. So we are kind of in the middle of some migration stuff before the season. We are sort of combining the best of two worlds, where the Georgia Players Lounge videos and the old school Dawgs Central forum that many people loved and preferred are going to live in the same place now at dawgcentral.com. So I'm going to be honest, my personal content creation has taken a little bit of a hit lately because I've kind of turned into a tech guy for the last 5 to 7 days. Looking forward to hopefully getting out some more 24 for 24 pieces by the end of the week, which is kind of just long form features on the 24 most important people to Georgia and their chances to win a third national title in 4 years, which would be truly historic. So yeah, come check us out over there. We'll probably, take some chains off here in the beginning and not paywall some things because we want you to come poke around. We want you to be like, ooh, I want to be part of that. So go to dawgcentral.com. Not like today. When does this come out?
Tomorrow.
All right, yeah. So like by Thursday, you can come to dawgcentral.com.
Okay.
Don't do it on Wednesday because we might still be, wearing some hard hats.
But also when you go, subscribe. Like if you're a Georgia fan checking this out and you have not already subscribed, go subscribe to Dawgs Central later this week.
Yeah. I mean, I do honestly believe, look, there's a lot of people that do great coverage in the Georgia space, and I'm fans of many of them. I think what we do is truly unique in terms of some of the long form analysis and trying to kind of tie numbers and like some of that stat nerd type of stuff and package it in a way that like my mom could understand. And we've gotten a lot of feedback that like, I don't know, our site has kind of helped people enjoy the game more, or, there's some nuance or something that they now appreciate better. And so I look at it as like we're all learning together as a community, and I think that's really fun, and that's a cool journey to be on. And I'm always trying to learn new things about the sport or take new data in. So I hope you guys will just like kind of join us in this collaborative learning effort that I think is what we are really doing together.
Absolutely. Graham, keep up the great work, my friend and teammate.
You too, Chase.
We'll check back in again soon.
Yeah, buddy. Appreciate you having me. Always enjoy it.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.